So welcome to our Lunch and Learn. Today we are going to be listening to a presentation about cybersecurity and cyber attacks from Dan O'Brien at BRCC. And I hope that you enjoy your lunch with us and learning something new. Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having us here today. Just to introduce a couple of folks, Dr. Kevin Ratliff is our Dean of Workforce and Continuing Education, who I work very closely with on a lot of these information technology endeavors. I also work closely with Jennifer Whitmore and Mary Sullivan, doing both non-credit grant-funded training and corporate training we'll be talking about. And then I'm happy to work with Dr. John Barlow as well, who is involved with our corporate training with Mary. So I'll go ahead and share the screen here for this presentation. And hopefully you can see me in the lower right-hand corner. This is a feature that came out about a year or two ago with Zoom, where you can actually share a PowerPoint and people can still see you. My students say this helps a lot, that I'm not just disappearing from the screen and they just hear this voice. So yeah, we've been working with Augusta County closely on a number of different ventures with IT. The folks at CSPDC, Bonnie Rysdell, she was a big help with getting our cybersecurity program started here about almost 4 years ago. So it's always great to see you all. So I'm Dan O'Brien, and believe it or not, I actually connected JMU to the internet back in the 90s. Since then, I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world and also work in Washington, D.C. with the Department of Justice. And about 4 years ago, I decided to go back into teaching and accepted a position here at Blue Ridge, which has been awesome. Real great folks here. And as I said, Mary Sullivan, here's her contact information, and John Barlow's information as well. We are now offering cybersecurity corporate training. So if a company says, hey, we can't really afford a $10,000 trainer to come in and sell us a bunch of stuff, we're available. We'll talk more about that later. So the focus here today is on small and medium-sized enterprise. A lot of folks I work with here in the Valley and with small businesses, they say, hey, Dan, who would want to attack me? Why should I bother with all this stuff you talk about? Well, the problem we've got, as you can see in this chart, is most small companies don't have any cyber insurance. And that's a relatively new feature that a lot of insurance companies sell. And if you don't have it and you get hacked, you get locked out of all your systems, you lose all your important information, you typically go out of business. Many companies have no budget for cybersecurity. We're going to talk about an issue that's big that we run into a lot here in the Valley, where someone actually goes to the trouble of getting some equipment installed, but that was 7, 8, 10 years ago, and it's out of date, it's vulnerable. They think they're cyber secure, but they're not. And we're going to talk about backups as well. This is the single most important cyber resource that you have, is having a good backup, because if you do get attacked, you can just simply restore everything. At any point, if anyone has any questions, just please ask. We also have a question and answer scheduled for the end. This is the risk to small to medium-sized enterprise, is that, look at this fact here, 60% of small companies go out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. 60%. And the other ones tend to have a lot of trouble because, as we'll see later on, maybe they lost some important data that was critical to their business function. Okay. A lot more attacks are targeting small business because, as we'll see here on the next slide, we have over and over and over again, a large company gets attacked because a smaller company they're doing business with was hacked, and they went through what's called the supply chain. It's a big thing these days. The federal government has been addressing supply chain cybersecurity. For example, if you see the big Target, oh, that's pretty ironic. They were a big target. Their small heating and air conditioning company that they work with had access to the Target networks, the entire Target database of all their customers, credit card information, home phone numbers and addresses. They all got stolen. I was involved with the Office of Personnel Management attack, where we believe members of a Chinese intelligence agency broke into the Office of Personnel Management and stole millions of secret clearance documents fingerprints, all this is all really secure stuff. And they did it through a third-party company the federal government was working for. I know the person who was working at Marriott when they acquired a smaller company. I believe it was DoubleTree. And all of a sudden, all their alarms went off because the hackers had been in the DoubleTree system. And immediately when they connected that network, that hack happened. So it's very important, if a small business is a vendor to a larger business, if they want to stay afloat, they better not, get hacked and cause the larger business to get hacked, because I'll stop doing business with them. So here's some of the common cyber attacks. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what some of the attack types are without getting too technical. And then I'll offer some solutions for how small and medium-sized businesses can help protect themselves, okay, without laying out a ton of investment. So the denial of service attack, DOS, that's simply where it might be random. It might be someone got your information off Facebook or through an email message, and they go ahead and they shut down your system. So for example, let's say that you're a restaurant, okay, and you do all your sales from a point of sale system that's connected to the internet. If someone's denying your access to the internet for a week, do you think that restaurant's going to stay in business? Do you think they're going to say, hey, sorry, we only accept cash this week? No, they're going to have empty tables for the most part. Ransomware is the big buzzword these days. And we'll take a closer look at that by how some cities have been affected around the country. And that's where someone basically encrypts all of your information so you don't have access to it. You can't open your human resources program. You can't open your email. You can't open that Word file you created yesterday until your company pays some hackers money and you're not sure if you're going to get the stuff back or not, okay? We're all familiar with antivirus. Everyone should have some sort of antivirus on their computer so they don't get attacked that way. Phishing, we've talked about over and over again. Please don't click on email messages that have links in them if you don't know where they come from. And we'll get into some more information about social engineering attacks, which are huge these days. So I work with a local company, small business, retail here, long-standing business here in Stanton, where I live. And I received an email from her to my Gmail that said, hi, I need you to send me some Bitcoin, please. And I was like, what? So I drove over to her business and I said, are you aware that you're sending these email messages? She goes, you're the third person I've heard from today. What happened? Well, some hackers got into her computer and they stole her email address book and then started impersonating her, sending all these messages out. So I helped her clear that up, and fortunately, no one accidentally, sent the hackers any money. This is the big thing these days, these different types of social engineering attacks. So if we look at this funny looking guy with the mask on and the impersonation there, that's typically what happens. Hey, this is an email message from your bank. We need you to log in because there's some suspicious activity. Okay, yeah, you're not going to do that. Hopefully you're not going to do that, because unfortunately that's the way where people end up giving their bank account information and then they get cleaned out. Let me tell you a quick story. A friend of mine lives in Waynesboro, and she said, hey, Dan, I had the worst thing happen to me. I got this phone call from Apple support, Apple computer company. And she says, the next thing I know, they're on my computer and they were moving the mouse and they were typing things and they got my credit card information, my bank information. Fortunately, the bank turned down the transfer that they initiated, but she did lose a couple $1,000s from a credit card scam. And I said, how many Apple products do you own? And she goes, well, I don't own any Apple products. I said, you don't own an iPhone? No, I don't. Do you own a Mac computer? No. I said, well, why did you answer the phone call? She said, well, it said Apple support. It looked like it was real. And that's unfortunately the training that companies need to provide their staff is sometimes lacking. Another big one is the IRS. You get a phone call. Hey, this is a federal agent from the Internal Revenue Service, and we need you to log onto your computer right away. No, of course the IRS isn't going to call you. One of the big ones Where my father actually worked is the Federal Reserve Board. I get these about once every 2 months. Hey, this is the Federal Reserve Board, and we've got federal agents waiting on a banking issue of yours, and you better answer us right away or you could end up in jail. The Federal Reserve doesn't work with your bank account. It works with major banks around the country. They're not going to call you. And then one of the new ones, which is actually kind of scary, the general term is romance scam. And that's where someone's on a dating site and they get in touch with someone and you don't really know who's there, who's behind that name. And slowly but surely they con people into sending them greater amounts of money, which tends to go overseas, which means they're not going to be able to get it back. Okay, so these are some of the main social engineering attacks, and only through training of your staff can you try to thwart these. I mentioned cities. My sister lives in Baltimore. They got hacked with ransomware about 2 years ago, and what they decided was not to pay it. I think it was something like $75,000 that got demanded. What happened to the city of Baltimore was all their computer systems were basically destroyed. No backups. So the only backups they had were on paper. Things like the water company, the fire department, the city manager, every department in Baltimore got hit. It's cost them almost $20 million so far to put the information back from paper to computer. My sister spent a year where she would get a letter saying, "Hi, this is Baltimore City Water. We don't know how much you owe us, but can you send us a check when you can? Maybe about 20 bucks. I mean, that's what happens. Lake City, Florida, they actually paid the $600,000 ransom, which caused a lot of concern amongst the population that they spent that money, but they got all the critical information back, except one woman had spent 8 years with a staff of 2 interns digitizing all the records of things like the maps of the cities, the floor plans, the natural gas pipes, sewer, etc. And she didn't get that hard drive back. So she lost all that work. It's not like you can pick up the hacker hotline and say, "Hey, you forgot to give us this one password for this computer." It was lost forever, even though they paid the money. And then what we've seen in the past 12 years or so is how investment in cybersecurity has changed drastically, and companies need to keep up with that. In other words, you can't just buy antivirus and a firewall for your network and then that's it. You have to be continually making sure that things are up to date. You need to make sure Windows is up to date. You need to invest in staff training. There's some great free and low cost types of training out there. And we'll be talking about some of the Blue Ridge offers as well. You got to spend the time making sure your backups are good. And then you need to look into cyber insurance, which we'll talk about in detail later on, because that's something that's we found is unfamiliar to many small businesses. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me? I don't see anybody's video. Okay, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, sometimes my connection will just blip for a couple of seconds. All right. The other thing too is, let's see a raise of hands if anyone here is familiar or has done a business impact analysis. Can you go ahead and raise your hand? Do a clap or a thumbs up or something. Business impact analysis. What we found in doing some in-person presentations such as this is that, okay, good, Dr. Ratliff's heard about them, that's great. Very few businesses have done a business impact analysis. This is very important because you have to say what happens if the business is shut down for a week, 2 weeks, a month, okay? For example, Merck, the Merck Corporation here in the Valley, they got hit with a cyber attack several years ago and they were closed for over a month. It cost the Merck Corporation billions and billions of dollars, which fortunately, after years of going through the courts, they finally got their cybersecurity insurance paid for a portion of that, okay? So, for example, you know, using the retail business, do they have a backup connection to the internet? You can get that very inexpensively these days. You can maybe have Comcast as your main business partner, and then you can get Segra, Lumos, Verizon as a secondary. And even though it might be not as fast as the primary connection, at least you'll stay in business, you'll stay on the internet. So this is a very important resource for businesses to see just how impactful a cyber attack could be. So are there any questions? Okay, we'll move into some suggestions that we have for businesses that we found by just doing these several actions, you can become much better protected against hacking. And I have my students that I teach in my cybersecurity class, they always ask, well, Mr. O'Brien, even if we do all this stuff, isn't there still the possibility that a hacker could get to us? Doing these steps can increase your security 99.9%. Okay, typically these are the simple things that a hacker's looking for. For example, that people don't have their antivirus set up correctly. So most people have built-in antivirus, Windows Defender, which is fine for a small business. You start to get a medium-sized business and you want to have a backup to that. You want to have maybe a second, what's called enterprise-wide antivirus. Just like in my car, okay? When I'm driving down the highway and I hit my left blinker, if there's a car in my blind spot on the left side, the car lets me know, beep, 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 okay? Well, you know, I'm perfectly capable of looking and making sure that there's no one behind me, but it's nice to have that extra, you know, protection that you know, ensures that I'm not going to clip somebody and maybe run off the road. So each computer in a business should have some sort of antivirus installed, and you need to make sure that it's updated automatically. In other words, some people just install it and maybe they want to run a program just one time and they turn off the antivirus and then they forget to turn it back on to do automatic updates. Okay, this is critical. This is like the single most important step right here is protecting against malware. Next, almost everyone has Wi-Fi. Okay, whether it's in their business, at their home, at the library, at Starbucks, whatever. Okay, if you have Wi-Fi, you need to make sure that that equipment is up to date. You don't need to send out your Wi-Fi name. You can keep that off so people don't see it. It's not 100% protection, but it helps. You need to make sure that you change the default password. This happens so often where people leave on the administrator account password and then someone hacks their Wi-Fi equipment and starts using it. Well, what's the danger with Wi-Fi these days? Well, in a very unusual step, the FBI 2 years ago issued a statement that said millions of people's home Wi-Fi gear has already been hacked, and probably Russians, North Koreans are waiting to use that to attack other systems around the country. And then they have, they do this all the time. So you need to make sure your equipment's up to date. That's an important one. And make sure if you've got a Wi-Fi router that's 10 or 12 years old, you need to make sure that it's running the best encryption. So if you're using credit cards, for example, so people can't steal your credit card numbers. Now, I want to divert from the list here and talk a little bit about training, okay? So everyone should have a policy, whether it's in the employee handbook or the acceptable use policy. Each company should have a policy for how people interact on the company network. In other words, people shouldn't be able to bring their own computer into work and hook it up to the company network. You don't know if that computer's got some sort of spyware on it or ransomware. People should always use strong passwords. That's the foundation of security these days, is making sure that you're using strong passwords or what's called multi-factor authentication. Put that in chat. MFA. So for example, when I log into my Blue Ridge account, it pops up a message on my phone and I have to actually identify myself with my fingerprint to show that it's me and that I'm allowed into the Blue Ridge system. A lot of these things are available for free or very low cost these days. You also want to make sure that employees are aware that there are acceptable use policies of things like social media, okay? No, I had this happen several years ago with some friends of mine that opened a restaurant in Stanton, and they weren't really paying attention to their social media. And it turns out one of their managers was posting all this crazy political stuff and hateful stuff on their Facebook account, and they ended up firing him. And they said, Dan, what do we do? And I said, you got to keep an eye on your social media for sure. Also, it's very important. I'm typing this in chat here, PCI DSS. That's the credit card company security. Every business that touches credit card numbers needs to do an annual compliance for PCI. And all the employees need to be trained, and they must handle credit card information securely. In other words, you're not supposed to store credit cards on your computers. But even if you just process a credit card at a retail store, you still have to make sure, for example, that your Wi-Fi network isn't open to the public. It's only used for credit cards, okay? And then another important thing that that is good for practice is to send phishing attacks, fake phishing attacks to your employees, and whoever clicks on it, instead of getting ransomware, they get training. Okay, so that's a big one. Now, I'm not going to advocate any particular products. It's just, this is one that people know, have heard about. No B and the number 4. No B4 is a great small business resource. Now, it does cost money, but they will do things like ransomware simulation, phishing on your employees. They'll tell you who clicked on stuff, who opened the message, and whatnot. Okay. When it comes to training, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've got going on here at Blue Ridge. And thanks to John and Mary, we have some new cybersecurity training available. So first off, we can work with the owners and managers of companies, you know, like on a half day or a 1 day corporate training to make them aware of what cybersecurity is and how it's important and what the risks are. I did this with a large corporation in the Valley about 2 years ago, and I sat down with their chief technical officer, and we brought in 2 of the owners and the chief financial officer and the CEO, and we put together a slideshow that was, why do we spend this money on cybersecurity? Because the owners were pushing back constantly, saying, why are you buying this? Why are you buying that? And we showed them the risks for ransomware, you know, malware, denial of service. And once they saw this short presentation and got some training, they then said, okay, we understand why we're spending the money. Okay. We can also work with your IT and administrative staff on training them on things like social engineering, on you know, basic cyber hygiene. And we can do that both with corporate training and also with grant funded training. We have some great short-term IT programs at the college that are good for any administrative staff to give them basic background in information technology and cybersecurity. For IT staff, we also offer grant-funded courses with industry-recognized certifications. Many of our students get free tuition and a check for $1,000 once they finish the class. So there's the link for our cybersecurity programs, and at the end, I've got our email addresses as well. John or Mary, did you have anything to add to that about corporate training?
Sure. This is Mary. It took me a minute to unmute myself. Yeah, if there's any company or organization that feels like they could use some assistance with some training, you can get in touch with me or John Barlow. And what we'll do is we'll talk to you about specifically what are your needs, probably bring Dan into the conversation as well as the subject matter expert who can ask the right questions. And of course, he would be the one that would ultimately deliver the training. So we'd be happy to custom design something that works for you. Anything to add, John?
That sounds great. I appreciate that, Mary, and Dan. Thanks for highlighting that as well.
Thank you both. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
That's okay.
Appreciate it. That's great. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be working with John and Mary on this. You know, we want to give back to the community and definitely, you know, offer our expertise and suggestions for keeping businesses in business. You know, it's a big thing these days. Okay, most people have heard about what a firewall is. It's basically a device that keeps the bad people off your system, okay? And basically, you have one built into Windows if you're using a Windows computer, and you probably have one in your home. You don't know it, but that device that connects you to the internet typically provides some way of making sure that only the things you want to get to your home computers get to your home computers, okay? And once again, it's very important that if you have employees working at home, that they must have some sort of firewall in what we call virtual private network, or VPN, which became very popular during COVID. This is instrumental in making sure that people that work at home can go ahead and do so securely without the information being stolen, okay? And all of these devices, like I said, if you bought one 10, 12 years ago, it's time for a new one. You can get very reasonably priced business class equipment for under $100, you know, if you shop around. Once again, we're happy to offer advice on what to purchase as well. This is the new thing, and this is what a lot of people get burned on because they're just completely blindsided on it, okay? If you use mobile devices, and who doesn't, okay, then you need to have some sort of plan for how to use these things securely. So the thing that you don't want to have is what we call BYOD, bring your own device. You don't want people just willy-nilly bringing in their iPhones and Android phones, connecting to your corporate network and doing who knows what, okay? It's very easy these days to just create what's called a guest network. Almost every internet provider has a guest network already built in. So if someone brings in their phone and they say, hey, I need to do my email, I need to text my kids, I need to do Facebook, whatever, okay? You put them on the guest network, not your corporate network. Or the company simply buys the employee a phone, and then they work with an IT specialist to lock them down so that the people can't add anything that could be making them cyber insecure, okay? Also, if people have a corporate mobile device, they need to have a good password on it, because if someone leaves it at the store or at a restaurant and someone picks it up, if they don't have a good password or fingerprint authentication, facial recognition, then someone could just use it and steal your money or your data. And there should be absolutely, people might get embarrassed that they left the phone somewhere and it got stolen, and maybe they recovered it a few days later. They need to report that so that the company can block that device. Oh, Kevin, good question. Yes, basically, you're going to have one device, okay, but it's got two different channels for Wi-Fi, and one of them only does your corporate needs, and then the other one is completely separated. It's like there's a wall between them, and that's for guests. One of my students last year had a brilliant suggestion, which I use in all my classes, okay? What he said was, I already used it at home, so I thought it was awesome that he did it as well. So let's say you have Comcast. Comcast automatically gives you a guest network on Wi-Fi, okay? So what he does is he puts his computer, his kids' phones, his wife's tablet on the main network. Then he puts all the other stuff, Amazon Alexa. Oh, Alexa will probably say something in the next room over. Ring cameras, Blink cameras, Wi-Fi speakers, Bluetooth lights. He puts all that on the guest network, okay? Because if somehow one of those gets hacked, it's got a wall between the guest network and his equipment. I thought that was brilliant, and you can do that in your own home. Businesses should definitely be doing that. Now, this is the key thing that's changed in cybersecurity in the last 10 years. What we're finding over and over and over again is people think they're doing good backups, but they aren't. And then they get hacked, they get ransomware, and they're scrambling, and they realize that their entire financial system, they can't restore it. Let me tell you a quick story that happened to me a few years back. I had an older laptop with a hard drive, and I brought it into Blue Ridge one day and it went bad, okay? Couldn't boot the computer. So I walked over to our computer repair shop and I said, any chance of fixing this? They said, nope. They said, how long did you have this? I said, about 5-6 years. They said, oh, you got an extra year out of it. And I was like, oh, great, okay, thanks. So I went home that evening and I got my trusty backup hard drive. Believe it or not, it failed. It went click, click, click. So there we go, completely out of backups, right? No, fortunately, I had backed everything up to the cloud. Well, what does that mean? if you have a Gmail account, if you have an Apple account, if you have a Microsoft account, and so on, you have free storage available to you where you can store photos, documents, files up in the cloud securely. Okay, every business should examine that and have their backups done at least somewhat to the cloud. And that way, even if their entire office is lost, they'll still have that important information up in the cloud. Okay, once again, I'll put it in chat here. Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Google, and a host of others offer free backup. Now, if you're a large business or medium business, you're probably going to pay for some Amazon Web Services backup because you're going to have a lot of files. Another neat thing that a lot of people don't realize, how many people raise their hand have Amazon Prime? Give me a thumbs up or a clap or something like that. Amazon Prime. Okay, I see John. I know some of you others do too. Kevin and Mary, great. Okay, if you have Amazon Prime, you can back up an unlimited number of photos. Unlimited. From your phone, from your camera, whatnot, okay? And that is a nice way to make sure that you've got family memories. If you lose the phone or if the card on your camera goes bad, you can back up any number of photos you want. As a photographer, it's nice for me because I can back up both the regular and the high quality images that I take with a good camera, and I don't have to worry about paying somebody to keep them, okay? And most people, of course, back up in their office. That's perfectly fine, but it's very important if you're backing up and keeping the backup tape or DVD, or whatever people are using these days, USB stick, make sure there's a copy offsite in case there's a catastrophic disaster and you lose the office or the office equipment or something like that, okay? So once again, make sure the backup works, make sure you can restore from the backup, and then store your information, another copy in the cloud or in the, on an offsite location. This is what we hear about all the time these days. Oh my gosh, Facebook lost millions of records, and I'm sorry, they didn't lose them, they stole them. Okay, people stole them. What happened with Facebook was they were sharing all the sensitive information with their partners. And one of their partners left almost the entire database of Facebook users. Once again, phone numbers, personal information. Companies need to make sure and protect their information. This is the most common one here I'll put in the chat, which is HIPAA, okay, for healthcare. Yeah, if you're involved in any sort of healthcare, there are stiff penalties for not protecting the data, even if you do it unintentionally, okay? There are worse penalties, of course, if you intentionally let the information get out and get stolen, okay? Each person in the company should be aware of how to protect their username and password. No more password on a sticky underneath the keyboard. That doesn't fly anymore. No sticky on the monitor. They need to know that they either need to have a password keeper on their phone or they need to have their password securely stored, okay? And once again, we've talked about this already, but you can't use things like password 123 or your name with the number 1 at the end. Hackers are so sophisticated these days, it's very easy for them to crack passwords that aren't, a long password or complicated one. And once again, this PCI DSS for your credit cards, that needs to be done on a regular basis to make sure that you're not going to get fined for not storing passwords properly. Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, we've already talked about this, but basically, yeah, get that multi-factor authentication. It's free in most cases with Google Authenticator. It's one of the big ones, and that's free. Anyone can use that on their phone or computer. And once again, if you're a medium-sized company, make sure that your smaller vendors, okay, are cyber secure as well. Make sure that they have multi-factor authentication. There's a movement in the federal government that started about 3 years ago, and we work with training individuals on how to do this sort of work. But all Virginia contractors for the Department of Defense need to prove that they're cyber secure. And there's been talk about having maybe state companies that contract with the state proof that they're cyber secure, and other organizations now with the federal government. For example, if you're in a financial, what's called a high-risk sector, financial, transportation, healthcare, you need to prove that you're cyber secure if you do business with the federal government. So this is becoming more and more of a thing, and it all starts with passwords and authentication. If people can get on your computer systems by cracking a password or faking out, username, once again, a lot of this information people can just find on your social media. If you've got people putting information up on your website about with email addresses, and you're putting things on, once again, one of the most important things, never go on Facebook and say that you're going on vacation, because someone's going to find your address. These are very simple things that we do, we cover in the corporate training as well. This is a good question from Dr. Ratliff. Does it help a company get lower insurance rates if they have cyber training? Let me see. Let me go ahead to the cybersecurity insurance slide to answer that question. Okay. So cybersecurity insurance has become a big thing these days. Unfortunately, the price has gone up quite a bit. But these days, as Dr. Ratliff was saying, you pretty much have to have an audit done. And part of that audit is going to say, did the company get cybersecurity training? Okay. So for a small company, the cyber insurance isn't that bad. And maybe they just simply need to do a self-assessment that says, do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus? Do you use passwords and so on? And do you have security training? And then you can get that cyber insurance. It's pretty comprehensive. It protects against most types of hacks or data loss. It also protects if something that happened on your network affected someone else. There's also liability insurance, okay, like you have for an automobile. So yeah, definitely businesses should be looking into cybersecurity insurance. Back in the old days, like in 2016, it seems like just a few years ago, but it's very old day in cybersecurity. There was an example, there was a bank out in Kansas City, and they bought cyber insurance, and about 3 months later, they got hacked. Well, they got $100,000 back from what they lost. But the insurance company said, okay, listen, you need to make sure that you're cyber secure. Well, about 6 months later, the bank got hacked again. They hadn't done a single thing. And the insurance company denied the claim, okay? Fast forward to 2022, and most cybersecurity insurance companies are requiring that they at least prove to a small measure that they're trying to do some cybersecurity, okay? Here are some resources. The NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, offers a lot of free resources for small to medium-sized enterprise. You can do a self-assessment with their assistance. And they also provide free and low cost. It's a huge page of free and low cost resources that you can have access to. I will go ahead and send a PDF file to the chamber if you all want to distribute it, and that would have these links on it. It's a great list of, like, for example, they have KnowBe4 on that list. They have small business assistance on the list, and medium-size assessment as well. Now, real quick, I've been using this term assessment a lot. What do we mean by that? Okay. What a lot of companies don't realize is, number one, they have no idea what equipment they have, how old it is, whether it's up to date or not. Okay. So the first thing that they need to do is a simple audit. Let's say you've got a small company with 15 employees, you've got about 20 computers, a couple of servers, an internet connection, and people have company provided phones. Okay. Someone just needs to sit down and document, what do we own? Okay. Well, let's say that you've got 2 computers that are old because they can only run a software program you need, like for graphics or for HR. Well, if you're running something before Windows 10, if you're running like Windows 7 or Windows XP, those systems can be very easily hacked. You either need to upgrade them, get rid of them, or you need to put them in standalone in a room with no connection anywhere. Okay. So that's the first step. What do you have? What do you own? And the second step is to simply follow a couple of assessment routines. Some of them are very short, like you're looking at 15 different things. Some of them can be very involved, where you're looking at 115 different things. And you're just inspecting to say, hey, do we have a password policy? Do we perform training for anti-phishing? Do we have backups? And this is a great way for a company to just self-assess and say, here's where we're good and here's where we need some help. And when you need help, there are companies all over the Valley. I know in Harrisonburg, Waynesboro, Stanton, I can't really name them individually. We have to be kind of neutral about that. But there are companies in the Valley. You can just Google, IT help security, and they will go ahead and help you. Of course, for exchange for cash, they want their money, but they're pretty reasonable around here, and it can at least get you started with finding out just how vulnerable you might be. Okay. All right. With that, do we have any questions? Well, thank you all for attending. The last slide here, once again, we have, if you want to contact me, I'm OBrien D at brcc.edu. And you can always find Mary, John, and myself on the BRCC website. And any help, or if you want to recommend us for corporate training, thank you all. If you want to recommend us for corporate training, please contact, Ed Pease just got here.
I just emailed him. I should have done it before, but I happened to think we were talking about that on something else this morning. So
okay.
Better
Hi,
late
Ed Pease,
than never.
welcome. Ed is the Blue Ridge Community College Chief Information Officer. Ed, would you like to say a few words about how you work to keep Blue Ridge cyber secure?
Very hard. We have a lot of processes in place. So we scan all our email and have a pretty hefty set of firewall rules.
Oh, Ed, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's one thing I didn't really talk about, but without going into detail, every company should have something that scans to make sure that people aren't sending sensitive information like in an email. There's a term called DLP, which is data loss prevention. And a lot of folks don't realize that they could buy software for their computers that make sure that their employees aren't either accidentally or purposefully sending sensitive information, credit card information, so forth, over either a web form or email. That's very important. Data loss prevention these days is very important. I hate to say it because we all want to love our employees, but insider threat is a very big thing these days, where some disgruntled employee is inside your computer system and they can wreak havoc. So there's definitely some software out there that helps prevent data loss prevention or protection. Yeah. All right. Did you all have more that you wanted to go over with the chamber?
No, I think that was a great presentation. A lot of good information there. It is crazy how the hackers have seemed to just like become so much smarter and so much more ingenious in their ways of hacking.
That's
so
exactly
we've got
right.
to stay ahead of them, obviously.
What's fascinating is when we think of hacking, we think of the movies where you have the whiz kid and you have the foreign person that's the expert and they're all typing really fast. But today's hackers, they simply have an iPhone that they've done what's called jailbreaking. In other words, they're allowed to use, programs that we wouldn't want to run. And for $50, they can go and they can download a software package. And the scary thing today is what's out there is what's called ransomware as a service, where all the person has to do is say, I found a network, I found a company. And they will go, of course, a lot of these are in Russia. The people in Russia will actually do the hacking. They'll do the ransomware. They'll do the payment. They'll do translation services. They'll work with an intermediary to maybe lower the cost to the company. And then the person just gets paid in Bitcoin And it's a thing. And like I said, though, if you follow these techniques that we've been talking about, you can really help to protect yourself. Ed, understated, he does a lot for Blue Ridge. And one of the things is, of course, is these phishing tests. And we get them regularly. And I think they're really instrumental in preventing people from clicking on stuff. You can't help that somebody clicks on something, then even if you've got a great firewall and good antivirus, you can still get hacked. So that corporate training and user awareness is really, really important.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention a couple of things we have coming up. We have our ribbon cutting today at Tropical Smoothie in Waynesboro, if anybody's there. I think Mary said she was going to come. And then business after hours is Thursday at Converge Local here in Waynesboro, or there in Waynesboro. And almost the end of our ticket sales for Murder Mystery. So if you haven't gotten your tickets for that and you're interested, those are on sale now through Friday, I believe. So definitely get your tickets for that, because surprisingly, there are still some seats there. And I wanted to thank everybody for coming. And we have these the third Wednesday of each month. So hopefully you will come back next month and see us then too. Have a great day.
Thanks now.
Thanks. Thank you.